For centuries, the vast imperial archives of traditional China served as the ultimate arbiters of historical and philosophical truth. These vast collections were housed in massive physical complexes, like the pavilions built specifically for the Siku Quanshu. The Siku Quanshu, or Complete Library of the Four Treasuries, was the largest collection of books in Chinese history, compiled during the Qing dynasty to consolidate the empire's written heritage. This diagram illustrates how that immense heritage was organized. Traditional catalogs divided all recognized literature into four strict categories: the revered Confucian classics, historiography, the masters and philosophers, and Bell's letters, which contained poetry and literary collections. Look closely at the branches for historiography and the masters. Thousands of volumes are dedicated to statecraft, military strategy, and complex philosophical treatises, mapping the entire intellectual landscape of the elite. But if we look at the very bottom of this system, there is a glaring omission. The traditional catalogs completely neglected to create a section for the textbooks that actually taught those elites how to read in the first place. This missing foundational stage is known as Mengxue. The term translates literally to teaching for the ignorant. Before any scholar could debate statecraft or memorize the Confucian classics, they had to pass through this stage. It was the functional bedrock of Chinese society. To understand how this civilization actually reproduced its intellectual class generation after generation, we have to look outside the official historical record. We must reconstruct a curriculum that the most powerful historians in the empire actively ignored. The formal educational pipeline for elite boys was highly structured, originating during the Han period. The Han period, spanning from 206 BCE to 220 CE, was the second imperial dynasty and established many enduring administrative norms. By the age of 8 Sui, which corresponds to 6 or 7 years old in Western reckoning, boys from the higher classes were mandated to begin formal instruction. This process required a physical separation from the home. Boys were sent to special preparation schools known as Waisha, Waifu, or Xueguan. Inside these walls, a master, or shushi, initiated the children into the precise mechanics of reading and writing Chinese characters. At the time, this early phase of instruction was referred to as the small learning, or xiaoshui, and sometimes as the smaller arts, xiaoyi. This graphic clarifies a crucial historical distinction. You have to separate the pedagogical curriculum of xiaoshui, the basic literacy taught to children, from the advanced academic discipline of lexicography, which scholars confusingly assigned the exact same term. The actual curriculum relied heavily on character dictionaries. Primers like the Kengji Pian and the Jiji Pian formed the core of the daily exercises. The Kengji Pian was an early, standardizing dictionary originally compiled during the Qin dynasty to unify writing systems. Once the students mastered the basic dictionary components, they progressed to accessible foundational texts. Books like the Shaojing, the classic on filial piety, and the Lunyu, or Analects, were introduced to begin their ideological training. The male Mengxue track was a public, institutionalized pipeline. It was explicitly designed to take young boys, arm them with literacy, and prepare them for advanced classical study and eventual state power. For girls, the system was entirely different. They were structurally excluded from these classrooms and formal schooling for nearly all of traditional Chinese history. The presence of young girls in a school setting, like in this image, represents a sweeping societal disruption from the early 20th century. Until that time, the educational exclusion was absolute. Female elementary education operated through an entirely domestic tradition. It was conducted strictly within the home, with mothers serving as the primary instructors. To support this instruction, a parallel, much smaller corpus of writings developed specifically for girls' education, often authored by female writers themselves. The content of these texts was strictly utilitarian. They focused relentlessly on explaining a woman's lifelong duties, first to her own parents, and later to her husband and her parents-in-law. The other major pillar of this female canon was highly practical instruction on managing the household economy and overseeing servants. These behavioral and management manuals were studied in tandem with basic character primers to achieve a functional, rudimentary level of literacy. While the male curriculum served as a stepping stone toward public philosophical mastery, the female equivalent functioned as a closed loop. It utilized basic literacy primarily to enforce domestic subjugation and maintain a strict societal hierarchy. This data table visualizes the Mengxue corpus that built Chinese literacy. On the left, the extensive list of standard primers and dictionaries. On the right, the female educational texts fill in. Though smaller in volume, this distinct body of work was equally vital. But when we examine how the elite scholarly class treated this combined data set, we uncover a massive historiographical bias. Almost none of these foundational texts were preserved. That red asterisk denotes an explicit exclusion. It signifies the text was completely omitted from the massive Siku Quanshu, left out of its official catalog, and ignored in its continuation. This archival erasure applied across the board, but it disproportionately impacted the female track. Outside of very rare exceptions like Banjia's New Jie, an influential Han Dynasty moral guide written by China's first known female historian, the books that taught generations of women how to live and read are now incredibly difficult for modern historians to even access. Why would the intellectual elite erase the very tools that taught them to read in the first place? Because the Imperial Archive was designed to be a monument to philosophical prestige. It was built to project high-minded statecraft, not to preserve a practical record of messy, utilitarian pedagogy. The history of Chinese literature as we understand it today is heavily skewed by survival bias. We revere the advanced texts that survived the imperial catalogs, while remaining blind to the marginalized, gender-divided primers that actually built the civilization.